Hi, welcome back. Well, I have to confess, after visiting Auschwitz, I'm not too excited about military history and wars and things of that sort, but I'm developing a little bit of a soft spot for this guy, William Fighting Mac Mackenzie. And to tell us about it is Dr. Daniel Reno from Avondale College of Higher Education. Hi, Daniel.
I'm very well, thank you.
It's a pretty reasonably hefty book.
Well, it deserves to be a hefty book because he was a hefty man.
Literally? Or
literally and metaphorically, in every way, he was a giant.
Okay. Now, when we think about Anzac and Gallipoli, you know, we think about Simpson and his donkey, and everyone's heard that legend.
Right.
But who's this guy? Where does he come from?
Well, this guy was the real legend. Strangely enough, Simpson and his donkey weren't hugely well known on Gallipoli.
Okay.
He was more famous in Australia. Mm-hmm. But this man was an absolute legend, not just on Gallipoli, but in Egypt beforehand, mm-hmm. in France, and for 20 years after the war. It didn't matter where Mackenzie went, he got mobbed by former soldiers and their families. Absolutely adored.
Okay, so William Mackenzie was a Salvation Army chaplain, is that correct?
That's right.
Yep.
He's not a likely candidate to be what some journalists called probably the most popular Anzac from the First World War.
Wow. Why was he so popular?
Well, I guess it's a function of his personality and his commitment. Mm-hmm. As I mentioned, he's a big man physically. Mm-hmm. He imposes himself just by his presence. Mm. But he's also extremely charismatic. Mm-hmm. And when you think about it, your typical Anzac, you're thinking of a bit of a larrikin, mm-hmm. Loves drinking, gambling, probably fighting a bit, womanising.
Mm. This sort of hard-bitten soldier.
That's it. Cynical.
Boys out for a bit of a lark.
Yeah. And we don't think of these men as being religious at all. Mm-hmm. Now, confront them with a man who spends the best of his energy trying to convert them to Jesus Christ. Mm. What reaction do you think you're going to get from these Anzacs?
Yeah, a wowzer, especially a salvo. I mean, they don't even drink, and, you know, you'd imagine that there would have been a lot of antipathy there.
He's a legend. They adore him.
Yeah.
Now, you think about the odds. What kind of man can stand for God, be opposed to most of the things the Anzacs do for entertainment, and be worshipped by them? They just loved him. And it's a function of his charismatic personality, mm-hmm. his talent for organising entertainments and diversions, mm-hmm. incredible hard work, wonderful sense of humour. Mm. And he was a real man's man, you know. Mm. He's in his mid-40s. The average Anzac is in his mid-20s.
Okay, so a bit of a father figure, a bit of a mentor figure.
He can outmarch them.
Oh, wow.
He can outshoot them.
Yep.
He can dig trenches faster than they can. There is nothing they do that he doesn't do.
Right.
On marches, he'd walk alongside soldiers half his age who were collapsing from exhaustion.
Yep.
And he'd carry their packs, maybe 2 or 3 packs, and keep up the pace. I mean, wow. A man like that, they just had such respect for him.
So that they could put up with him when he was around Cairo, wasn't he? Like dragging them out of brothels and saying, come on, let's do something a little more wholesome?
Well, every chaplain preached against the brothels and the cheap, nasty alcohol of Cairo. Mm. But Mackenzie was the only one who actually did something about it. He actually went down at night and would pull the men out of the brothels and put them on the tram back home. Mm. Now, he fully expected to be stabbed by the touts. Mm-hmm. He wasn't. Mm. But the famous Australian historian C.E.W. Bean actually credits Mackenzie with saving the lives and the reputations of thousands of Australians because of his work in keeping them out of the brothels.
Wow. Now, obviously he's a bit of a tough guy. You know, this is the era of muscular Christianity,
yes.
Obviously.
Yes.
They called him Fighting Mac. That was his nickname. How did that come about?
Well, there are various stories as to how it came about, and the bottom line is I don't know which one is true. Mm-hmm. He was certainly a bit of a fighting lad. Mm-hmm. He loved fighting in school. There are stories of him fighting on the boat out from Scotland when his family emigrated.
When you say fighting, what you mean, like scraps over issues? Or?
Yes, just getting into fisticuffs. I mean,
okay.
He's a very energetic personality.
Yep.
He's big for his age. He's got huge fists. As an adult, he compared them to a leg of lamb, his fist.
Okay.
So, and robust. And prior to his conversion, he wasn't scared to use his physique to get what he wanted.
Didn't mind throwing his weight around.
Yeah. And there are stories that he boxed in boxing tournaments with soldiers. I cannot pin any of those stories down, so I don't know if they are true. I suspect that if they were, someone would have written about it.
Sure.
I mean, if your chaplain knocks you out in a boxing contest, I reckon somewhere...
Maybe that's the sort of thing you wouldn't write home about, Daniel.
Oh, well, but somebody watching probably would have.
Yes, that's true.
I cannot find it. I just can't find it.
Okay.
But he got that reputation as fighting Mac. He stayed as close to the front line as he could. Chaplains were supposed to be in the rear lines.
Right.
He did everything he could to be right in the front line. At Gallipoli, his dugout was the closest to the wire of anybody's.
Okay.
And he did that quite deliberately. He was just attracted to action. Yeah.
So during the actual Gallipoli campaign, I mean, it obviously wasn't all, concerts and boxing matches or whatever. Men were dying, thousands died.
Yes.
In terms of his role as a chaplain and providing spiritual support to those young guys who would have been incredibly traumatised, what do we know about how that went?
Well, again, it's on Gallipoli that he really makes his name.
Yep.
And it's for a combination of just the encouragement, the buoyancy that he brought to soldiers who were suffering from the effects of war. And his courage. For instance, the attack on Lone Pine, the very famous attack on the 6th of August, he went over the top behind the troops, not immediately after them, but while the fighting was still going on. He was in the trenches with the fighting going on just ahead of him, sorting the dead from the wounded, administering first aid, praying with them. There's a story that he tells, actually, of a young soldier who came to him the night before the attack and said, look, I've drifted away from God. I want to find him again. How do I know I'm right with God?
Yeah.
And Mackenzie prayed and talked with him for quite some time. Well, 2 days later, Mackenzie found his body in no man's land at Lone Pine, buried him, and took the letter from his pocket that young soldier had written to his mother, saying, I've given my heart to God.
Wow.
I belong to him. And
Incredible.
Mackenzie posted that letter to the young soldier's mum in Scotland.
That would have been an incredible comfort.
It was. And a deeply moving experience for Mackenzie. I mean, the tragedy of losing that young man, but knowing that he was eternally right with God.
Boy.
That he had a future.
Incredible. So how do we get hold of this book if we're interested in having a read?
Well, Christian bookshops will have it. Koorong, ABCs. We are hoping distributors, secular distributors will also be stocking it. So keep an eye on your secular bookshops. Mind you, ask in the secular bookshops. That's a good way for them to stock a book about one of our Anzac Christian heroes, the most famous fighting man in the AIF that we've now forgotten.
Yeah, wow. There you go. So check it out. The man the Anzacs revered. The most amazing Anzac story you've never heard. So thanks so much today, Daniel, for coming in and sharing this. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Ken.
We'll be back straight after the break.